Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, September 20th. Derek VanRiper, Sarris here with you on this episode. Shohei Ohtani has created the 50-50 club. We'll talk about that historical achievement, which came as part of an all-time great performance at the plate.
I love that he didn't just do it. He just did it with that.
Yeah, it wasn't like a 1 for 5 where he got the 50th steal or something. Now, of course, he did it in greatest showman fashion. So we'll take a look at some of the historical games that are comparable to what Ohtani achieved on Thursday. Bo Bichette's season is over. We'll talk about what his future might look like. I liked Bo a lot going into the season. That was a bad call. We'll see how much of a discount we're going to get in 2025. We'll keep an eye out for some Juan Soto news after he collided with an outfield wall. We've got a second half strikeout minus walk percentage leaderboard that we're going to look at for some potential surprises, both good and bad. And we'll have a weekend waiver preview for those who are still pushing through the final week of fantasy baseball season as the regular season comes to a close next week, Sunday. So still a little bit out there if you're trying to just make those last couple of adjustments and finish in the money or possibly bring home a title. As always, if you'd like to join our Discord, you can do that with the link in the show description. Lots of good stuff happening in there. But, let's start with Shohei Ohtani. He creates the 50-50 club, 50 homers, 50 steals. We've never seen that before. We'd never even seen 50 homers and 25 steals in a season before. And that was where my brain went right away when I started thinking about the stolen base environment and people that would be naysayers just to be jerks. And I thought, okay, it's a little easier to steal a base now than it has been at a lot of other points in big league history. Doesn't matter. This is still an absurd achievement. Being a 1 of 1 in Major League Baseball history is always going to garner a lot of attention. So I decided to make a stat head search for 50 homer and 10 steal seasons, which did actually spit out 16 seasons in baseball history. At the very top, from a power perspective, you might recall the Barry Bonds 73 home run season in 2001. He stole 13 bases that year. So that's at the high end for power. You probably have forgotten the Brady Anderson 50 homer, 21 steal season in 1996.
No, nobody's forgotten that. That was an amazing year.
The Brady Anderson one might be more remembered than the Greg Vaughn in 1998 when Greg Vaughn hit 50 homers and stole 11 bases. But most of the names on the list, most of the seasons you see are all-time greats. You have Babe Ruth popping up on this list.
You Mantle twice.
Mantle, a couple of A-Rod seasons, a couple of Aaron Judge seasons. You got a couple of Ken Griffey Jr. seasons. And the closest things we've seen to the 50-50 were really like 50 and 24. Willie Mays hit 51 homers and 24 steals in 1955. A-Rod,
I think, is the best player of all time.
Yeah, and that's the level that we're looking at as far as 50-50 and what that actually means right now. The takeaway for me,
you can also, like you're saying, you can also take away 30 bases. Take away 20 bases, stolen base. And when the stolen base run environment went up, it didn't double. New rules didn't double stolen bases. So you can't take half of his stolen bases away. If you take 10 or 15 away, still the most stolen bases ever by a 50 homer season.
Ohtani stole 20 bases last year with these same rules. And yes, he's played 15 more games so far this year. That doesn't cover the difference of 31. It's almost just like every time it's like I can do more. I think it's believing
you just wanted to do it.
Do more. Yeah. It's like I can actually run. I can steal more bases. You know what? It was easier for everybody on my team to steal bases, so I'm going to get more. And he's been caught fewer times. So he's been caught 4 times this year. He's 51 for 55. Every time I think we found the ceiling for Shohei Ohtani, he proves us wrong. Like the lesson here, never doubt him. Nothing's impossible.
What are the numbers? He went 6 for 6 with 2 doubles, two doubles and 3 homers, 10 RBI, 2 stolen bases. I mean, it's the best season of the best offensive game of all time is what I will give him.
Yeah, you have to give him that title. There's some ridiculous games in baseball history that I think are better all-around performances. There were a few people in the Discord pointing out 10 RBIs from the leadoff spot is also kind of absurd.
Oh, and here's a good one too. Yeah.
A couple of steals in this game as well, right? Because if you look back, another stat head search, you can find 3 homers in 6 hit games, and that spits out a pretty amazing list. A few all-time.
Nobody feels.
Nobody had a stolen base in their 6-hit, 3-homer game. I mean, it's hard to steal bases when you're not a homer. Like
from Gabriel Star, GF Star 1. Even setting the 6 hits aside, no player has ever homered 3 times and stolen multiple bases in a single game before.
Yeah, that's never happened. The Sean Green 4-homer 6-hit game pops up on this list. Edgardo Alfonso had a 3-homer 6-hit game back in 1999. Ty Cobb did it. Walker Cooper did it in 1949. Jimmy
Special
Fox,
shout out to that Jimmy Fox game that you pointed out. Yeah.
Jimmy Fox did it in a game in 1932. And every game except for this one, where a player had 3 or more homers in a 6-hit game, was a blowout win for their team. Like none of those games were close, except for Jimmy.
When
Fox's
Rendon
game.
is on a list, the game was 23-5.
Yeah, it was a laugher. I mean, yesterday the Dodgers won 20-4.
And didn't even Ohtani? Did Ohtani get one of his homers off Brujan?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Jimmy Fox did that in an 18-17 game that went 18 innings.
Yeah,
that game only lasted 4 hours and 5 minutes. By the way.
Yeah,
ultimate rabbit hole. Yeah,
that's what you're gonna when you get into the 3-homer games. Like you get the worst reliever at some point, and you get that extra one. But it doesn't matter because there was also the 2 doubles and the 2 stolen bases. And I did want to point out that this was the greatest offensive game because shout out to David Lorilla and some people in our internal Slack that in MLB we were basically trying to put together the best games we've ever seen, and I'd never heard of some of these games. I love Rick Wise threw a no-hitter and hit 2 homers. Like, that's pretty good. We could still get a game like this from Ohtani, by the way. So, don't count him out.
I think Fabian Ardaya, the Dodgers writer at The Athletic, needs to make sure that Shohei Ohtani knows about Rick Wise because we need to give him another milestone to try and reach.
Yeah, the other one that was from David Lorilla was Tony Cloninger. Or Tony Cloninger, 1966. He hits 2 grand slams and pitches a complete game. He gave up 3 runs, so it's not the no-hitter, but 2 grand slams from the pitcher. He had 9 RBI before that in the season. So he doubled his RBI. I think he had 1 homer before it because he was 25 when he did this, but 2 grand slams and a complete game. What do you think? Which one do you take? 2 grand slams? Because that one's Rick Wise. I think you take that one. That's a no-hitter plus 2 homers. 2 grand slams, a complete game versus Shohei.
The Rick Wise one comes in first for me.
Maybe Shohei comes second.
I think you could make the argument for Shohei second. I mean, I think complete games in that era, especially, were not as rare.
Common,
The no-hitter is rare enough on its own, and to even hit 1 homer in a no-hitter is absurd. So that's why the Rick Wise one is just off the charts.
What did he have for breakfast that day?
He had the flu. He felt terrible. And he was facing the Reds on the old crappy turf. I was reading an old story about it. He was facing the Reds on the crappy turf at, I think that was Riverfront Stadium at that era. So it was just disgustingly hot. So he felt like garbage and did that.
It felt like garbage.
Makes sense?
Makes sense. Maybe he was trying to get quick outs because he just wanted to get off the mound. So he just threw a bunch of grounders and they just went at his hitters that day. And he's like, let's get out of here.
He said he was a fly ball pitcher. He got a lot of ground balls, 6 balls left the infield all day. And that was against a pretty good Reds lineup too. So
he was just trying to get out of there. He felt bad.
He just wanted to go and lay down and drink some Gatorade and take a nap, and had the best game ever played. So this is an all-time elite offensive performance from Ohtani, not only on Thursday, but also this season. And we've talked a little bit about 2025 and what the first round of fantasy baseball drafts are going to look like, but people might remember, Shohei Ohtani is going to pitch again next year on top of what he does as a hitter.
I wonder how much that'll matter for weekly like NFBC type things. It doesn't matter. He'll still be like a top 3 pick just as a batter now. So
right. The only thing you have to wonder about is depending on whether there are any changes to how stats are processed for Ohtani. Like ever since he came to Major League Baseball, the way different sites have handled him has varied slightly. Most of them would not allow you to accrue stats from one side while using him in one role. If you use them as a utility, you weren't getting the pitching stats. If you pitched that day, if you use him as a pitcher, you weren't getting hitting stats. Now, what I'm wondering is, since Ohtani came to Major League Baseball, we've added the universal DH. So pitchers don't hit anymore on a regular basis. So programming-wise, if you set up your fantasy game to actually count hitting stats for pitchers, then if you used Ohtani as a pitcher, you'd get the hitting stats too, because other pitchers aren't hitting.
You wouldn't get penalized by all the bad ones. Yeah.
Right. So I want to actually take some time and reach out to different commissioner services and see if anyone's going to handle it that way, where you'd get all the stats simultaneously, if that's the case in your league, or if you get him as one player and you can start him both ways, or however they handle it.
In terms of the way the user interface is, I would doubt it, just because if you think about your lineup, so you have the hitters in one place and the pitchers in another, and it's like, I wouldn't even know how they would represent it, because there would be like this one player where they had 2 lines in the box, in your like internal box scores.
Yeah, it would. The display issue would probably be worse than the counting issue in some ways, because you wouldn't like, where would
they
you
just fuel your standings? They can. That's fine. That just goes in your standings. It's great.
Yeah.
But how do they show it to you on your page?
I think as awesome as Shohei Ohtani is as a player, he's about that much of a programming headache for developers to try and like tweak and work everything.
He's
around.
Like he's like the one man Danny Jansen, gets traded from the Blue Jays to the Red Sox and has to finish the game on the other side of the pitch.
I do know from, decade plus of sitting 10 feet away from programmers at RotoWire that all of the fun stuff that happens in baseball, all the weird stuff, basically everything Jason Stark writes about is a headache for someone.
They hate.
It's not as easy for them as it is for us to sit back and enjoy it and just laugh.
Definitely suspended games are something that anybody who does stats roots against.
Ohtani just as a hitter, you think top 3 is where he belongs in 2025? I mean, you're looking at Bobby Witt Jr., Ohtani, and who's the other third? Who's the third you're putting in there?
Well, actually, I was looking a little bit more of his time, So, this year, just by WRC Plus, it's Judge, Soto, Ohtani, with Rooker and Witt. Rooker tied with Ohtani, WRC Plus. But Bobby Witt right there, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Yordan Alvarez, I think should be in that discussion. Gunnar Henderson, Bryce Harper, Mookie Betts. That rolls out the top 11, but Ohtani's a clear step ahead of a lot of those guys, so it's really top 3. But I'm also trying to incorporate the fact that Ohtani was good, not great, before this, and he has a career, and so I was like trying to compare him to in the 2000s by WRC Plus. It's Barry Bonds, Aaron Judge, Mike Trout, Yordan Alvarez, Juan Soto, Manny Ramirez, Shohei Ohtani. So if you are willing to include base running, then his best comp, I guess, is Mike Trout. And Mike Trout has in the 2000s has a better WOBA and a better WRC plus. So I think as a batter, I have him second to Trout, second-ish to Judge, so of his time, a top 5 hitter. And then, of course, you add in the pitching. I don't know that I'm willing to give him top hitter of his time yet.
No, but I can't dismiss it as a possibility anymore.
That's right.
He turned 30 in July. And the thing that surprised me the most, I think, about Shohei Ohtani in the last 3 seasons is that he's kept the strikeout rate in the low 20% range instead of sitting in that 25+% range that he was at for the first 4 years of his career. And the other thing he's done that we really don't see on a lot of player pages other than Aaron Judge, he's got multiple seasons now with barrel rates above 20%.
Mm-hmm.
That is extremely rare power to put with.
And he took like a max EV in his first 3 seasons. That was like, it was good. 12 to 115, which is really good. And he turned it into one of the best in the league, where he's been 119, basically 119 plus since. That's Stanton-esque. Stanton's doing 120s, right?
Yeah.
So he not only changed his barrel rate, so it's not like he always had the raw power and found a way to tap into it. He changed his raw power level and his game power level, which is very rare. Like I don't know guys that change their max EV that much. We've seen it with the young guys. So like CJ Abrams, where he's like, oh, he hit a ball 112 once. You never done that before. But he's like 22. So you're talking about a Shohei Ohtani who goes away for elbow surgery and then comes back and hits the ball 4 miles an hour harder than he ever has before.
Yeah, that's exactly how elbow surgery works for most people.
I mean, he's just an athletic freak, and I think that if I had some, there's the cold freezing takes are going on around Ohtani, and I have some of my own. I thought that maybe he would be like a center fielder who was also the closer. That's what I saw, because at least, to give me some credit, I could see that this guy runs like a gazelle and is super tall, has all these long levers, is going to get into the power. But I was worried when he first came in about the refinement of those tools. He was kind of like one of these really toolsy young guys that had the raw power, but struck out too much as a batter, right? Even as a pitcher, he had the raw power, but he didn't really have good command. So the thing that's been so special, I think, about the late 20s and early 30s for him is that the sort of refinement of those skills is happening. He's adding the sinker. He's adding a little bit of command. He's adding the game power, So, that's I think it's somebody who had some of the best tools of all time now coming into his own in terms of the skills.
I don't know if it's because he's a two-way player, a unicorn, something that we may never see again in our lifetimes. But do you have to start to think about training and how it could change the aging curve? Like, we think we have a handle on the aging curve at various points, and it seemed like peak age was getting younger. Maybe it actually is for the general population of ball players.
The
that
average
might still be true.
Baseball is getting younger. I don't know what that means about peak, but it does
like
seem
like
the denouement, the ending is getting worse for players. They're like I've already said this a bunch of times, but there's no 36-year-olds,
But what if there is this second peak that players can reach, right? You get up athletically, maybe your peak is in your early mid-20s, 24, 25, but your overall skills peak comes closer to age 30 now, because there's better tech, better science, better things to help you stay healthy and to keep getting better. Like, maybe there's something there.
It's worth asking with Aaron Judge, right? Who's right now having the best season of his career at 32.
Yeah.
And so you do wonder if we need to reevaluate sort of years between 29 and 32. But, Judge is old.
Judge is old. The thing that I don't think has necessarily changed is I don't think injury risk has changed as you move deeper into your career.
I think that's what we'll see from Shohei. That's what he's already shown us, right? So he may give us a little bit of the Sandy Koufax package from both sides, where he just doesn't, get the big round numbers. Like, maybe Shohei Ohtani never hits 500 homers or even 400 homers, He's got 222 and he's 30 years old. So, it may be one of those things where he burns so bright, but we still have discussions on whether or not he's the best player of all time, because he only ends up with 300 homers and 100 wins or whatever.
There's so many ways for him to be great for a very long time, though, given the foundational skills he has shown us up to this point.
Yeah. What if he adds 100 saves at the end of his career? And he's like John Smoltz plus.
Or he's a Gold Glove defender in the field because something changes and he can't pitch. Like, there's so many different random things that could happen here. I can't even begin to try and predict how Shohei Ohtani is going to age. There's no comp. There's no template. We're completely flying.
I kind of think he's already in the Hall of Fame, we were debating whether or not he's like one of the best players of all time, and like I think he's obviously headed towards something like that. I just wonder if like something catastrophic happened tomorrow, would he be in the Hall of Fame already? Not by WAR, because he's only at 38 WAR, but with the lore and just all the stuff he did, like maybe.
What he does as a hitter also gets dragged down by WAR because he does it as a DH. So I think that's the other part of the Ohtani story, that people will get that right. They will fix that, I think, over time, as far as acknowledging his greatness. And I hope we don't have this out. I hope we just get to see it. I hope we get to see it for a long time, because like I said earlier, I don't think we're ever going to see anything like Shohei Ohtani again. I think people are going to try, but this is like, it's like wanting to be Michael Jordan. You will have great players that follow, and they grew up idolizing him. And I think they could still fall short. They could be 80% or 90% as good, and that's still really exciting and really fun to watch, but it might not be on this elite all-time level.
It's a funny thing that describes like where he is already and where he fits in. So he's tied for career WRC plus with Joe DiMaggio. Man, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. His seasonal OPS, a seasonal WRC plus, which is the best season of his career, or actually second best to last year, but his seasonal OPS is 172. Barry Bonds' career WRC plus is a point better. That includes all the ups and downs of a career. The problem is that Barry Bonds' career did not have the normal downs at the end, and we all know why.
It did not have the normal downs.
So, and we know why. So, it's a little unfair. But to have Joe DiMaggio plus possibly 100 wins, maybe 100 saves. I think he should just do that. I think so. He's just like, and I'm the closer now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe at like age 37, like, yeah, the wear and tear of being a starting pitcher and still being one of the best hitters in baseball at this age isn't working, but I'm going to come in and close out a bunch of games. Okay. Sounds good. Let's have you do that, Shohei. You mentioned downs. I'm thinking about downs for a player that shouldn't be down. That's Bo Bichette. His season is over. He's got a finger injury now that put him back on the IL. He only played 81 games this year. He hasn't been healthy. I mean, that's a huge part of the story, but I liked Bo Bichette in the third round back in the spring. I thought there was a lot of value here. I thought there was a chance he'd get back to 15 steals. He'd pop to 20 homers again. I had high expectations for the Jays lineup as a whole. Those were largely unmet. Although, if you believed in Vlad Jr., if you thought this could be an MVP caliber season from Vlad Jr., I think you were right. It's just been sort of wasted by other things that have happened in Toronto. But as Bo goes, we know he's had an unusual approach for a very good player throughout his career, right? A lot of chase outside the zone because he can get to those pitches. Not a lot of strikeouts despite chase, but also a pretty heavy opposite field approach. And the more we've looked at what happens when you go to the opposite field, especially if your barrels are to the opposite field, we know you're not getting as much out of your barrels there than if you were pulling them. We've seen Bo Bichette most years settle in with a barrel rate just below 10%. A lot of hard hit balls, great batting averages, solid OBPs, just a good all-around offensive profile. The downsides in his profile at times have given me like Tim Anderson vibes, but I don't think we're talking about a Tim Anderson crash just yet because Bo is only 26 years old. So,
and he hits the ball harder than Tim Anderson ever did.
Yeah, so like it was more the approach.
Yeah.
So how will this age, right? Like this is an approach we've been leery of for a long time, but generally it's worked as an early round skill set. Was my
He's also 26.
Bad?
26. Usually the chasing really starts to bite you at 30,
Mm-hmm.
So he's still 4 years away from when you traditionally think the chasing would bite him in the butt. And I think to some extent he just didn't have, when we talked about Julio Rodriguez just getting hurt in the middle of a hot streak, like when you have 336 plate appearances and your max EV is like 2 to 3 miles per hour off of your career max EV and your barrel rate's half of what it normally is, I kind of just get a read that you just didn't get going. Like you just never could get going. Every time you might have gotten going, something went wrong health wise. So I would buy him next year. I think particularly because it'd be at reduced prices. The one thing that I will not buy is that the speed is ever coming back. So he's gone from when he debuted. He was 83rd percentile in terms of speed. It's been a pretty strict downward turn. He bottomed out last year at 43rd percentile overall in sprint speed, and then he got it back up to 50th. But 50th for a shortstop, he is the 47th fastest shortstop according to Fangraphs. I mean, according to Baseball Savant. So I don't think the speed's coming back, and I think it'll push him off the position pretty soon. Like, I think his next deal might not be to play shortstop. He's got one more year with the Blue Jays. So I think he'll be moved off a shortstop soon. But I do think he's got 3 more years of what I would say he can do is hit 280 and hit 20 homers and steal 5 bases. I think he's got 3 more years of that.
It's weird because you don't have to run a lot to still have a lot of value in 5x5 roto leagues. But if you are a middle infielder who's not elite in batting average and well above average in power, it's a tougher profile to roster because you just need bags from everywhere. He's not the same guy,
but you know what he's like? It's like Carlos Correa.
Oh, it's like Correa. Yeah, it's more like Correa than Seager. I think that's because Seager's swing decisions and power numbers are better.
He's sort of like Freddie Freeman at middle infield or something.
Okay, so I look back at the Meatball draft, the Rob DiPietro Pull Hitter podcast draft from about a month or so ago now. Jeez, it's been a while. But
yeah, where did Bo go?
Bo went just outside the top 100 overall. Pick 107 is where he landed. That feels about right as far as
who are the middle
infielders
goes. He's up again.
Ezekiel Tovar went later in that round. So there's a would you rather. I know we've had questions about Tovar's approach too. Tovar versus Bo for 2025. Who do you like?
Tovar.
I mean, the park.
I don't even like Tovar. Tovar.
I don't even like Tovar. His O-swing percentage went up again.
It's 48%. Dude, ridiculous.
And much like
not
Bo,
in OBP leagues.
bases.
I might take Bo over him in OBP leagues. I don't know. Yeah. The over-under on Tovar's OBP next year is 290.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But Tovar's making it work with a pretty awful approach. The only thing that gives you a glimmer of long-term hope that Tovar could become more patient as a hitter, he's still 23. He's still young enough to start making some changes, or at least even if he doesn't walk more, maybe he'll strike out less,
or just
more balls
strike out less. Yeah, he had better contact rates at points in the minors.
So that could be the toggle. I think the other middle infielder in that range at second base, Matt McClain, went 3 picks before Bo. So what do you think about Matt McClain versus Bo?
McClain is not going to prove to us that he's healthy. And so we're going to be left wondering not only about his shoulders health in terms of what power he'll give us next year, but also how much power did he deserve in the past, you know?
Yeah, Matt McClain, I think it was McClain versus Geloff, I think was one of our toss-ups for this past draft season, right? And we loved the park for McClain, but I think with Geloff, there were some things that were maybe a little better in the underlying numbers, and we didn't get a chance to really get an answer because McClain hasn't been able to play. Multiple injuries this year.
Bichette with the risk that McClain comes back and he just doesn't have the same power.
And McClain's at least going to run,
right?
Yeah, McClain should run for sure. And the park's going to help keep the power afloat, at least being in Cincinnati. It's not going to be. It's not going to have zero power.
Could have like
look what TJ Friedl does in that park.
Yeah.
So okay, so you're
going to take McClain over Bo?
I just need some better health reports first. And we're talking about two guys that have been hurt, but I think McClain coming off of a major shoulder surgery is a lot worse than Bo's combination of injuries this year. So
I think so.
I think they're right to be clustered together. If I were drafting in this moment, I'd take Bo for the bounce back. But if we get more information, if McClain's at least healthy enough to not be rehabbing anymore and to be trying to get better this offseason instead of trying to get healthy.
How about above Tovar? Is there somebody that we'd be like, oh, we like these guys, Tovar and Bichette, better than these guys?
So going a little bit earlier than these two. Not a lot of middle infielders in that cluster. Actually, catchers, pitchers, corners.
This is like last chance saloon middle infield. This is where like people are
kind of like it's kind of like the middle infielders that people like. Jordan Westberg also went in the 8th round. So what do you think about Westberg against Bo and Tovar?
I could almost see taking Tovar and Bo over Westberg. I like Westberg, but he has this weird thing where his contact rate is worse than his strikeout rate. And he kind of does it also on the barrel max EV thing, where his max EV is okay, but his barrel's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And
he didn't steal that many bases. Westberg has a little bit of collapse risk to him, I think. I think he'll be good, but it could be 250 with like 17 homers and 3 steals next year.
Yeah. Another one of these guys that doesn't run that much. That's where the McLean profile fits the position better than the rest of the group. Yeah. But I still see a world in which Bo Bichette is very good in batting average, great at piling up runs and RBIs.
It still gets you 20 homers. I think he can
get you the 20. Again. Ends up being a good value where he's going. Oh man, am I going to turn Bo into this year's Glaber? Is that where we're headed? The whole point of this season was to stop stepping on the same rakes, and now I'm already like making resolutions to step on the same rake.
Glaber has at least done like a late season rally, dude. He's up to 250 with 14 homers and 4 steals, and I kind of want to look at his auction calculator. What do you think his earned value is in 15-team leagues with an MI?
$6.
Wait, I got to get an MI 5OF, 1 CI, 1 util.
Oh, you're doing the long hand. You're not doing the new player rater? Unreal.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
You just miss filling in all those boxes, don't you? There's a part of you that likes to go through and change all of those boxes every single time.
$9 second baseman Gleyber Torres behind Cronenworth, McMahon, and Pfaadt and Westberg.
Not turning into the party hangout that I'd hoped.
The pity party hangout?
No, it's just the Arrested Development.
Okay.
George Senior's up in the attic, the hot tub. And it's not going well for him up there. I thought Glaber was just the most obvious value in that 7th round pocket where he was going. I just thought everything was great. He's got 2 superstars in the lineup with him. Everyday job, walk year. It's just
interesting.
Runs a little.
Like he still had a productive season.
Right. It's not a disaster, but you still lost value relative to where you drafted him. You probably were looking for 15 plus and you got 9. So it's a slight
so you
loss.
drafted him around Andres Jimenez, who got, let me see what ADP. Oh yeah. You drafted him ahead of Andres Jimenez, who got $13.
Mm-hmm.
You drafted him ahead of Luis Garcia, who got $16. You drafted him ahead of Arias, who got $17. Turang got $18. Steer got $20. You drafted him ahead of Ketel Marte, who's the best second baseman in baseball, and it's $30.
Ketel Marte did even more. Like that's what I thought was in the range. Like I thought a monster, like a reasonably monstrous season from Glaber, like an almost as good as what he did when he hit 57 home runs against the Orioles in a season a few years ago. I thought like most of 2019, like let's say 30 homers was possible in the walk year. That's where I was wrong. Like good average, good power, double-digit steals, great counting stats. That's what I thought we were getting. And we didn't get that.
I mean, he just had the best K rate of his career last year.
Yeah, man.
Second best stolen base rate. He's going to the walk year. Yeah.
Another thing I was wrong about. I'm just going to keep making confessions on the show for the remainder of the year. But let's shift the focus over to a leaderboard that I was kicking around. That comes out real small if you're watching us on YouTube. But all it is it's the second half strikeout minus walk percentage leaderboard. I put a few different things on there, including the stuff numbers and just looking at ratios, looking at different things and trying to find surprises, good and bad. I'm going to not strain Eno's eyes and just take that off the screen right now. I found a few things that stood out to me looking at second half numbers. Chris Sale has a 25.9% K minus BB percentage in the second half. I set the minimum innings to 50. So there's like 93 pitchers, I think, that qualified. Sale's doing that with an 86 stuff plus. So there's something going on with Sale. Like he looks fine. He looks like typical Chris Sale by most reasonable measures right now. But that was just kind of jarring to me as someone who was dominating in
and his first half.
Care about.
The first half stuff plus was good. Actually, was really good for Chris Sale. So I don't know what's going on there necessarily. One thing I can say is that we probably will see a boost for all lefties of maybe 6 to 8 points of stuff plus.
But still, like a 92 or a 94 on that result is just it's working. It's working for Chris Sale. That's all I've got. But even
the other thing I can say is he's fairly unique. I mean, I sat behind the plate with my son for a game of Blake Snell versus Chris Sale, and that Blake Snell's number 1, Chris Sale's number 3, and it was really stark how weird their arm slots were, both of them, and I think that feeds into something where it's like, yes, stuff plus captures that because to an extent, because it loves release point. But when the weirder you are, the fewer comps you have,
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. That explains a lot of it. Blake Snell, by the way, you mentioned he's first in K- BB percentage. The main reason I made this leaderboard is because I'm trying to get ahead of all the undervalued pitchers for 2025 stories that'll be out there, sleepers, all that kind of stuff, right? Like that. This is usually like phase 1 of figuring that out. But Blake Snell, I think he's going to go a lot earlier in 2025 than he did in 2024 because I don't think he's going to sit on the free agent market nearly as long, right? He's going to opt out and either get more years to stay with the Giants or he's going to go somewhere else. Do you think we're at the point now where after another great season from Snell, even though there's been injuries and the workload concerns are still there, do you think the market will finally push him up more like a top 10 starter again? I mean, there may have been a point early in his time with Tampa Bay where he popped up there once. I don't have historical ADP handy right now, but like, what's the difference between Snell and Glass now in terms of injury risk, but then like the possibility of a massive payoff with a ton of strikeouts and ratios if he stays healthy for most of the season?
Cy Young, right?
Get 2.
Yeah. But the weird part for me is that I don't know that on the open market he's changed his pitch much.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But another year of showing, hey, this works. I'm really good. I make your team better.
But it's still like, I'm going to give you 110 innings in 1 year and 150 and 180 in other years. It's like that's the reason why nobody wanted to give him the full 60. I think if I was a front office, I would try to lower that AAV a little bit and just be like, I'm going to give you the Gossman plus deal. I'm going to give you, 5 and 140 or something.
Okay, so you're going to stretch it out a little bit further. I mean, I think there is a question of how well will Blake Snell's stuff age for keeper and dynasty purposes. Is there a similar approach for you talking about how Chase ages with walks? Like, do you worry the same way? If Blake Snell walks a lot of guys right now, it doesn't matter because he strikes so many guys out. But if he walks as many guys 3 years from now as he does today, and the stuff's not quite as good, those walks come back to bite him a lot more. I mean, a huge part of Blake Snell's skill set is hit suppression. And like, that's also hard to hone in on. Like, how much of it is Blake Snell? How much of it is Park? How much of it is defense? Clearly, there is a role he has that his stuff has in how difficult he is to hit. Year over year over year, you see low hit totals against his innings total. That's just part of Blake's who he is. And he's done it in 3 different organizations. Generally in all pitcher-friendly parks, but at least different places where it's like, okay, this is a skill that Blake Snell does own for his career. 838 hits allowed, almost 1,100 career regular season innings.
If I'm reading Bill Petty's aging curve for pitchers correctly, pitchers' walk rate generally just goes down over their career. If I'm reading it incorrectly, and that's saying that pitchers' walk rates get worse, it says minus 0.5. So you think, okay, it's minus 0.5 off a bad stat. And home runs per 9 go up and walks per 9 go down. So I think I'm reading this correctly, and just pitchers walk fewer batters over the course of their career. There could be some survivorship bias, which is that if your strikeouts go down and you have terrible walk rates, you're just not in the sample anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this aging curve suggests that. But I think it also makes sense that, like, one of the ways you stay in the league is figure out how to command the ball, and you know more about yourself. And so I think that actually speaks well to Snell, because strikeout rate is the one that goes down really badly. But at least he's starting in like an excellent top of the league place, So you're saying in terms of components, he starts with a 34% strikeout rate. Yes, he's going to lose some off of that. But aging curve suggests that, his 10-11% walk rate you might actually expect better going forward. Not a lot better, but, maybe 9.5, he's done that a bunch. So I think aging curves are kind to him. The only way that they're not kind to him is that if he's missed so much time early in his career, he's only going to miss more time going forward.
Yeah, and I do think with Snell, it's not the same type of injury every time either. So there's multiple trouble spots. But all of that being said, I think he's going to cost a little bit more. If he stays in San Francisco or lands another pitcher-friendly environment, I'm probably in. I think it's not impossible to find decent innings on the waiver wire. And I think the payoff, like the risk reward, is probably worth it at this point. We've seen enough good Snell to trust it. Spencer Schwellenbach, man, he's popping in the second half. There's your guy. Like for every site that runs a 2025 undervalued players
story, he's going to be on everybody's list.
Everybody. There's going to be a lot of Schwellenbach helium.
It might be
24.8% strikeout to walk, 3.05 ERA, 105 WHIP in the second half. He's tied with the third best location plus too. So he's commanding like well. Lots of pitches. Like he's on a good team. You could look at his workload and say he'll throw more because he's been building up since he was a two-way player, late convert to pitching in college. All of the stuff. I know it's all there, so it's coming. But like, how much is too much? Like, at what point are we pricing Spencer Schwellenbach so highly that he almost can't exceed expectations anymore?
Yeah, I won't know that until I really get my fingers into it. But like, I mean, if you're taking him in the top 25 pitchers, then you're buying him at his upside.
You've taken away the profit potential. Like, you've already paid full freight. Yeah,
I think so. I don't necessarily see him as an ace, that's like, going to move into the top 15 or whatever. So you just don't have that much ceiling beyond that. I think he'll be like a top 20, top 25 guy, but we'll see. The one thing that happens is, injury is such a big part of this, where from doing rankings over the season, what you notice is that guys who you think are top 25 guys eventually get into the top 10 by the end of the season, or top 15 by the end of the season, just because everyone got hurt. So like he could find his way into the top 10 that way. But sort of true talent, everyone's healthy. I don't know that he's a top 10 pitcher for me in the big leagues. I find it interesting, the guys with ERAs over 4 on this list. There's not many of them. I mean, we're looking at the leaders in K-BV. It's super predictive. So most of the ERAs are 2s and 3s, and it's Bowden Francis and Bryce Miller and Shota Imanaga and Zach Wheeler and Tarek Skubal. It's like, that's the list. But the guys over 4 are Logan Gilbert, Sonny Gray, Nick Pivetta, Brandon Pfaadt. These are in the top 20. Brandon Pfaadt, and I'm going to leave those 2 off, I guess. So those are the guys in the top 20 in K-BB with an ERA over 4 over that same time frame. And I think I'm generally in on all of them going forward. One thing that I see with Sonny Gray, and of course, what do they all have is, well, not all of them. Logan Gilbert, just you spotted this one, a 52% left on base percentage, which is just ridiculous. That's just luck, plus maybe the relievers didn't help him out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Gilbert was the 6th starting pitcher taken in the aforementioned meatball draft, early 3rd round. I don't think anyone's going to get tricked by that. I think he still belongs in that conversation.
Seems like a horse, healthy stuff, Ks, it seems, yeah, I'm not worried about that. Sonny Gray, I'm a little bit more worried about because he's older, and the reason why his ERA is higher is home run rate, and he's really fallen in love with that sweeper. And of course, that sweeper is going to keep his stuff plus number up. But we've seen him now in periods of time late in the season and in the playoffs fall in love with the sweeper, throw it a ton. And I just think he becomes predictable in a way that some guys sit on that pitch or spit on that pitch, whatever it is, get him into bad counts, whatever it is. There's something about his arsenal that makes, like, it's also just not like a plus fastball anymore, right? So, if you're a guy who's just bending tons of breaking balls, it's a little bit more like Joe Musgrove territory. You're like, oh, the stuff plus loves him, the K-BB loves him, but he's still not, I still can't put him in my top 20, even though my projections say I should. That's how I feel, sort of Musgrovian about Sonny Gray. And then Nick Pivetta is just, I wonder if Brandon Pfaadt is the new Nick Pivetta, but Nick Pivetta, I think it has something to do with the park. I mean, a 2.4 home runs allowed. I think it has something to do with the fact that he throws a sweeper from a extreme four seam arm slot. I don't know, dude. Nick Pivetta has, for the most part in his career, been less than the sum of his parts.
Yeah, like Nick Pivetta has shown us who he is for a long time, and I do think home parks have a role in that. But I think the Pfaadt part of this is interesting because Pfaadt just had a great start last night against the Brewers. He got the Brewers twice in a row because of the schedule. Brewers knocked him around in Arizona the first time. He came back, had 12 Ks, and was excellent.
Against the same team.
Same team. I realize, day after clinching the division, maybe there was a little bit of a hangover effect. They didn't play a week. They gave Willie Adames a day off. Otherwise, like Contreras was in the lineup, Churio was in the lineup. It was not a watered down lineup. It was a great performance. And I'm looking at the game log. I just wanted to see what was different. This is where I think having the stuff plus in the game logs is kind of helpful. Pfaadt's four-seamer had a 112 against the Brewers in the start in Milwaukee on Thursday night. For the season, it's a 95. So he was way above his season norm.
It oscillates a lot. I'm a little surprised by this. He has 110s, 105s, and he has 92s and 83s. He has a 78 stuff plus game. 75. Well, that's home against Colorado. So he goes all the way from 75 to 112. That's the most I've seen any pitcher oscillate. And I think that's something we spotted actually at the very beginning. We've talked about Brandon Pfaadt so much.
Mm-hmm. He's the new Mitch Keller from conversational purposes.
Yeah. But
so
even
Nick Pivetta and Mitch Keller just smushed together into one.
Oh my God. We'll just rename this the Pfaadt Keller
Pfaadt chance.
Yeah, Pfaadt chance. I mean, one of the first things we said was we're seeing large oscillations in his stuff plus due to atmospheric conditions in the minor leagues. Remember that conversation? That was like one of the very first things we ever talked about.
And look at some of his fastball stuff numbers at home compared to on the road. I think that four-seamer dips in various locations. I think it's a little worse at home than it is on the road.
Yeah. Oh, I need a split on this. Yeah, that's just from the eye test. That's a lot of the high numbers are on the road.
So that's a problem potentially if you have to make half your starts in a dry environment that doesn't work.
Dry and it's not going to grip as much, and in maybe in more neutral / wetter environments, it grabs. I mean, 107 in Miami, 104 in San Diego. Baltimore 111.
I can confirm that it's very humid still here in the upper Midwest, where summer has been extended for a few weeks.
Yeah. So, the story with him is a little different than Pivetta. With Pivetta, you like look at each of the parts and you're like, yeah, good pitcher. Right. And then you look at the results and you're like, that's annoying. With Pivetta, I think with Pfaadt, you can you see inconsistent forcing. And so at his core, Pfaadt's probably best as a sinker slider guy with a decent curve, right? And then you're like, oh, this guy has a problem with lefties. And that, I think, has been true his whole career. This year, he has a 277 WOBA against righties and a 341 against lefties. For his career, that split is also 40 points. It's 40 points, 349, 309. So he's a guy who's just trying to keep it together against lefties. And I think that has something to do with the results changing from game to game to which teams have great slugging lefties or whatever.
I may have accidentally built a Brandon Pfaadt in our Build a Pitcher draft yesterday, actually. Looking at some of his characteristics.
What did you get again?
I had plus extension, which is a good extension, not elite. I had, I think, off-speed velo and breaking velo. He doesn't have elite fastball velocity. The feel for spin. Like I've got,
but 85 on the slider is pretty good. 87 on the changeup. You're right.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a Brandon Pfaadt profile. The thing I do like, they've already started to taper off his usage of the four-seamer compared to last season. So I get the sense that the organization is working through it. Like there's a path forward. I think what's going to make Pfaadt a frequent part of the conversation here and everywhere is that when you look at a half season and you see a 5.97 second half ERA against a 3.38 Sierra, most reasonable people look at that and say, I want that pitcher. And then when you look at the models and you see, better than 105 stuff plus, location plus, pitching plus, there aren't a lot of guys that have that. Like, it kind of doesn't really matter like what lenses you like to look at. They're all going to tell you that Brandon Pfaadt should be better. Most of them are going to tell you that Taj Bradley should be better too, other than the home run rate being just absolutely off the charts. And Bradley gets discussed in this podcast enough too, so we don't have to rehash Bradley right now.
A few names at the bottom that, once you start getting past the top 25 in K-BB, you start getting closer to average, right? So average, I think, is around 14%. Cody Bradford, Nathan Eovaldi, Colin Ray, Luis Severino are all around 18 to 19%. in K-BB, so a little bit above average in K-BB. I like all these guys a little bit, but I'm not putting them on sleeper lists. With Cody Bradford, the issue is just velo. I don't know how much I can trust a Cody Bradford. Cooper Criswell and Cody Bradford both look okay by Stuff Plus. And I'm just a little bit distrust pitchers that average 90 or less on the fastball. So that's not. And then I like Eovaldi, but I think between a lot of times the injuries and the age and like we don't know what park he's going to yet. I think Him and Severino are just guys that I'll take if they fall to Colin Ray territory. You know what I mean? Like I'll just take if they're free pitchers, but I don't want to do a real investment in them. So I think that Eovaldi and Severino will end up, in somewhere between 50 and 60 in my rankings next year, despite having good K-BB, okay Stuff Plus, all that stuff. You have to consider aging curves. Those matter for Stuff Plus, for everything, for projections. And then, to some extent, their results just haven't been that great.
Yeah, you do have to be careful. You definitely have to be careful there. The other thing that caught my eye on this board before we move on, Framber Valdez has a K rate above 30% in the second half. He's quietly putting together his best all-around season for ratios. It's more of the same in a lot of ways, just like a slightly better version. I don't have Framber anywhere. I just how and why do I keep missing? Like, I know he's good. Like, I know what he does works. I think I keep underestimating him or putting him in the same bucket as Logan Webb. And I think there might be a little bit more strikeout floor and even strikeout ceiling from Framber that I keep missing.
Well, one thing that neither of them has is a had going into this season was a plus hard breaking ball, like basically a slider. And both of them over the course of this season, Webb and Framber, have really put forth better efforts with their harder breaking ball. So, Webb has found a pretty good sweeper at 84. And in his last game, he threw the most cutters of his career, 20% cutters against Baltimore. It wasn't the most amazing overall game in terms of results, 5 innings, 8 strikeouts, 3 earned runs, but it's a decent lineup away from home. And Framber's slider usage over the last few games and over this course of the season, I think explains a little bit of the difference in his strikeout rate. So I do. He doesn't use it all the time or even every game, but it is important for him to use that slider sometimes. And I don't know what else. The other thing is that he, again, as a lefty, he's undervalued by Stuff Plus right now.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. But he just keeps coming up, delivering a lot of innings with good ratios and a few more Ks than I expected. So we'll see if that second half actually turns into anything more. But even if it doesn't, I'm happy
I traded Heston Kjerstad for him. I'll be honest about that.
Oh, geez, that's a great trade. Let's take a look at the waiver wire here for the weekend. Who are you trying to target as you look for any answers possible in the final weeks? I mean, it's chaos out there. I mean, there's like Grant Holmes is stepping into the rotation for Ronaldo Lopez. You're like, maybe Grant Holmes can help me. Richard Fitz is getting some turns for the Red Sox. He's got another one coming up here on Friday night against the Twins. He hasn't allowed an earned run in his first 2 big league starts. So, pitched pretty well at AAA this year too. Maybe an interesting guy in keeper and dynasty leagues where available to stash on the end of your roster right now to possibly get a shot at a Boston starter for 2025.
Yeah. Reese Olson gets the Rays. He didn't pitch that well in his first start back, but the Rays offense, Miles Michaelis at the Giants, Davis Martin. I think it's a bad week to buy 2 starters because necessarily the last start is last game of the season. So like Marcus Stroman is supposed to be a 2-starter, Baltimore at home, Pittsburgh at home. I don't think there's any way Marcus Stroman pitches in that last game if it's meanerless to them.
Yeah, or if he does, they just give him one turn through the order, let him get his work in, and then they just say, okay, let's pack it up and get you rested up for the start of the playoffs. I could definitely see that with more.
And then you could like
starters.
You could try to so you could try to do like, oh, okay, I'm going to do a bad team young starter where they want him to start that last game and get innings because they're trying to get innings out of him. Well, I just said bad team worst starter. You want that guy? Jonathan Cannon, like Angels at Detroit. Maybe he makes that last start. And it's decent matchups. I'm not going to say don't get Jonathan Cannon, but that's where you're shopping in deeper leagues if you're looking for a 2-starter on a young team. I mean, even Jacob Junis, they need him to start just because they've run out of arms in Cincinnati. He gets at Cleveland, at Chicago. That's and he's not always like going to go 5 or 6. So I don't know. It's a tough week for streaming pitchers for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Landon Roop, who you mentioned earlier in the week, doesn't have a start on the RotoWire grid yet, but he could end up starting one of the weekend games against the Cards next weekend. I mean, you have to look for guys that haven't hit their innings limit, whose teams just need to get through the rest of the season and try and stream from that group. There is a possible 2-step for Hayden Birdsong. Maybe he makes both of those starts, but at Arizona for the first one in a game that matters for the D-backs. And then the last day of the season would be the second one, home against the Cardinals. It's like, if you could just have the last one, you'd choose that. It's like, there's risk all over when you're trying to find innings here in the final week. It's like the worst thing to need, because you need the perfect intersection of guy with no restrictions who either individually cares a lot or team needs him to just keep shoving through, and then an opponent that doesn't have anything to play for or isn't very good. Like, those lines
you need it scheduled. Yeah, because I've got a good pitcher for you who has a 2-start next week, and who a pitcher I like, and somebody I would pick up in keeper leagues and hope that he hits a role next year is Landon Knack.
Oh yeah.
If you want Landon Knack, he gets the Padres at home, and then he's at Colorado to finish the season. So good luck with that choice.
So it's very, very tough on that side. Are there any bats that you've noticed in the last week or so that might actually be out there and able to help?
I mean, one of the things that I do normally for bats, because I'm in a lot of leagues where I'm just looking for bats that are playing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking for, the guys who are playing the most, and Gio Urshela could patch over some stuff for you. The young guys that are playing a lot, I can't recommend them for you. Maybe Jared Triolo. What's the Pirates schedule this week?
Yeah, that's the other thing you're looking at too, like looking for extreme schedule imbalances and trying to find a group of all righties or something
versus
along those
Milwaukee
lines.
at New York. Maybe New York
Yeah.
is resting guys.
Maybe by that weekend. Plus, they get the park boost going into Yankee Stadium for that weekend series. I think as far as like possible prospects that have been recently called up that might be available in some more shallow formats, Luis Angel Acuna is getting a look right now.
Look, so I've seen the Mets fans are very active on Twitter, and and they're a large fan base, and a lot of them saying like, oh, this could be real, this power, dude. Like Acuna's ISOs, at AA and above start with a 0. So I don't know that I believe in this power. I know he hit 2 homers. Congratulations to him. It's hard to hit in the major leagues. I don't think he's a hitter. I think he's a utility player.
I can't figure out why it wasn't better at AAA this year if he's more than just like an average bottom third of the order starter. That's the part I can't quite get.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of speed, 40 for 54 as a base stealer. So if he's bottom third of the order on a good lineup, can actually use that speed, not hurt you in batting average, then
he'll probably be better than Luis Guillorme is what I'm saying.
Oh, I think he's better than Luis Guillorme, but
I'm not sure he's a starter. Do you think he's a starter in the league? I'm not sure.
I think he might be. I think there's a good enough chance he's a starter. But think about where expectations might have been for like Bryce Terang this time a year ago, and then look at what Bryce Terang did. A lot of it's opportunity and then having that categorical juice. So it could be non-zero power with good speed and an average that won't hurt you. That would work.
I don't think they're moving Lindor off short yet, though.
No, it'd be at second base.
And they're not. I mean, they haven't been playing him in center. If they're playing him at second base, they're ceding a fair amount of offense. So, it may happen though. I guess. I mean, he's up against Iglesias, who's not on the team next year, and we're talking about free agents always with the Mets, right?
Always.
And maybe Brett Beatty gets it together. And Jeff McNeil comes back next year.
Yeah, that's no guarantee though. That contract is brutal. So, and they can move McNeil around a little bit too. I mean, Acuna is playing short right now because Lindor's been hurt. So we'll see if Lindor's back for the weekend. That could create a little bit of a squeeze. But even Acuna versus Iglesias, I know Iglesias has been a very pleasant surprise for the Mets. Like it could turn to a little bit of a timeshare next week. That's the little bit of a short term problem, I guess, with Luis Angel Acuna. I was thinking also Nick York is getting a chance right now for the Pirates when you mentioned Jared Triolo before. So Nick York might be out there in a few
They are
playing
Jared Triolo, Nick Gonzalez, and Nick York in the infield. And the weirdest thing is they're just sort of like rotating them. So each of them gets a shot at shortstop. I guess they're trying to figure out who can play shortstop for them.
Yeah, give them all reps. Why not?
And the answer may be none of them.
But you want to know that sooner rather than later.
That's true. One thing I like about Nick Gonzalez is Nick York more than Nick Gonzalez is making the contact. Nick Gonzalez, I think, maybe has a slightly higher ceiling because he's shown a little bit more oomph, and he's been making more contact since he made a swing change, this year. So I do think Nick Gonzalez ranks a little bit ahead, and then Triolo is probably last for me in terms of upside with the young guys because he strikes out the most and has the worst batted ball stats. But the one nice thing about Triolo versus the other two is he steals bases. So I think we have a chance that all three of them play regular roles for the Pirates next year. I mean, you're going to come back with Brian Hayes, but shortstop and second are open, plus utility infield, plus first base is, I think, open. Rowdy is under contract until the end of the year. So there's a possibility it's Triolo, Gonzalez, and York for first and second and short next year.
Yeah. An opportunity to find some PT, though, for the final week, though. If you look at that Pirates infield, I think Tyler Soderstrom's another guy over in Oakland who's playing a little bit more here in the final days of the season as well. If you're looking for some help on the corner, the possibility of a home run or two. Soderstrom's got pop. Just a question of how long it's going to take for him to tap into it. We're going to go. Good luck with those final weekend pickups. It's a mess out there, as you could tell.
The main event moved into third. I got a chance.
Good luck. Try to finish it off. Try to at least get that entry fee back. That's not nothing.
Yeah.
The event. You can give us a follow on Twitter. Eno's at Eno Sarris. I'm at Derek VanRiper. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. You can also get a subscription to The Athletic at theathletic.com/Rates and Barrels. $2 a month will get you in the door. Have a great weekend. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.